Everyone thought they had Caitlin Clark figured out. They thought the locker room was already cracking, that Raven Johnson was walking into Indiana with resentment, unfinished business, and a score to settle that had been building since that viral moment on national television. The clips were everywhere. Clark waving her off, the missed shot, the headlines calling it disrespect, and then Raven's own words, "She broke me." That was all the internet needed. Suddenly, this wasn't basketball anymore. It was personal. Fans split into sides. Narratives exploded. And before these two even shared the same court, people were already predicting disaster. A toxic locker room. A silent feud. A team doomed before the season even started. But here's what nobody saw coming. It didn't fall apart. It flipped. Because after Indiana's blowout win, Raven Johnson didn't just show up. She took over the game. She took over the moment. And then she walked straight into the spotlight, looked directly at the cameras, and said something that hit like a shockwave across the entire league. The same player they said she hated. She called her the GOAT. And just like that, everything people believed started collapsing in real time. But what really happened behind the scenes is even more explosive. Long before Indiana ever called Raven Johnson's name on draft night, this story was already burning beneath the surface slowly, quietly, and dangerously. Because this wasn't just about two players meeting in the WNBA. This started in college, under the brightest lights possible, where reputations are built, and sometimes broken, in a single possession. Final Four, Iowa versus South Carolina. Undefeated season on the line. And right there, in front of millions watching, Caitlin Clark made a decision that would follow both of them for years. She didn't guard Raven Johnson. Not loosely. Not cautiously. She waved her off. Dismissed her. Dared her. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't quiet. It was loud, visual, and unforgettable. A moment that instantly turned into a clip, then into a debate, then into a narrative. Because in that one gesture, people saw something deeper. Disrespect. And when Raven took the shot and missed, the internet didn't treat it like a basketball play. They turned it into a defining moment. Memes exploded. Comment sections turned brutal. And suddenly, Raven Johnson wasn't just a player anymore. She was the target of a narrative she never asked for. And behind the scenes that hit harder than anyone realized. Because weeks before entering the WNBA, Raven finally said what she had been carrying for months. She broke me. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. That moment didn't just stay on the court. It followed her into every conversation, every interview, every scroll through social media, where strangers replayed her worst moment like it was entertainment. She talked about the hate, the pressure, the way it made her question everything, even whether she wanted to keep playing at all. That's not rivalry. That's damage. And for the internet, that was the confirmation they were waiting for. Now it wasn't just a clip. It was a storyline. Clark wasn't just dominant. She was disrespectful. Raven wasn't just a competitor. She was broken. And when the WNBA draft approached, people didn't see two athletes growing into professionals. They saw unfinished business. So when Indiana stepped to the podium and selected Raven Johnson, the reaction wasn't excitement. It was shock, confusion, chaos. Because in the minds of fans, analysts, and especially the loud voices online, this wasn't a basketball fit. This was a collision waiting to happen. How do you put two players in the same locker room when one of them publicly admitted the other shattered her confidence? How do you build chemistry on top of a moment that the entire world already turned into humiliation? It didn't make sense. And that's exactly why the narratives got louder. People started saying Clark had an ego problem, that she didn't respect teammates, that she would push Raven out the same way they claimed she dominated everyone else. Others flipped it the other way. They said Raven would never accept her role. That resentment doesn't disappear, it hides. And when it comes back, it explodes. The media didn't need confirmation. They had something better, a story that felt real enough to believe. And just like that, before a single practice, before a single preseason game, before a single conversation between the two, the Indiana Fever locker room was already being labeled a problem, a fracture, a ticking time bomb. But what nobody understood at that moment was that the pain from the past was about to turn into something completely different, and the very person they thought would carry that resentment was about to flip the entire story on its head. The moment Raven Johnson stepped into Indiana's facility, everything the internet thought it knew was put to the test. Because this is where narratives usually get confirmed, not broken. Training camp is where tension shows up, where body language exposes everything, where silence between players says more than any interview ever could. And people were watching closely. Every clip, every practice photo, every interaction, waiting, hoping, honestly, for something to go wrong. Because if Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson really had unresolved tension, this was where it would leak. This was where the story would prove itself. But instead, something strange started happening. Nothing exploded. No cold shoulders. No awkward distance. No visible resentment. In fact, the opposite. Raven Johnson started asking questions. Not just a few. A lot. About the offense. About the reads. About the timing. About everything. And who was answering them? Caitlin Clark. The same player the internet said she couldn't stand. The same player people claimed had broken her. Now standing right next to her, explaining, guiding, teaching. That alone should have cracked the narrative. But people ignored it because it didn't fit the story they wanted. So they doubled down instead. They said it was fake. They said it was PR. They said it wouldn't last. And that's when the pressure quietly shifted from the past to the present. Because now it wasn't just about what happened in college. It was about whether this partnership could survive real competition. Then came the game that changed everything. Indiana Fever versus Nigeria. Preseason, but it didn't feel like it. Because all eyes were locked on one thing. How do Clark and Raven actually look together? And from the opening minutes, it didn't look tense. It looked dangerous. Raven Johnson wasn't playing hesitant. She wasn't playing like someone carrying emotional baggage. She was everywhere. Deflections, steals, rebounds, relentless pressure. The kind of energy that doesn't just show effort, it shows confidence. And every time she disrupted the game, Indiana got faster, sharper, more aggressive, and right in the middle of all of it, Caitlin Clark was orchestrating, calm, controlled, reading everything, not forcing shots, not chasing moments, just running the system and letting it breathe. That combination, it shouldn't have worked this quickly. According to the narrative, it wasn't supposed to work at all. But on that court, it looked natural, like two players who understood exactly what the other needed. And then the numbers started backing it up. Raven leading in steals. Raven controlling defensive tempo. Raven impacting possessions without even needing to score. That's not a player struggling with confidence. That's a player who knows exactly who she is. And then came the moment nobody could spin. Post-game. Microphones up. Cameras rolling. This is where athletes usually stay safe. Neutral answers. Generic responses. But Raven Johnson didn't do that. She didn't dodge. She didn't soften it. She didn't pretend. She said it directly, clearly, without hesitation. She called Caitlin Clark the GOAT, not a great player, not a talented teammate, the GOAT. And just like that, everything broke. Because think about what that means. The same player who once said Clark broke her just publicly gave her the highest level of respect possible. That's not small. That's not casual. That's a complete reversal of everything people believed. And it wasn't just the word. It was how she said it. No bitterness. No tension. No hidden emotion. Just respect. Real, visible respect. And suddenly, all those narratives started collapsing at once. The they hate each other story? Gone. The locker room tension theory? Gone. The "this won't work" predictions? Destroyed. Because the one person the internet used as evidence against Caitlin Clark just became the strongest proof in her favor. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable for the people who pushed that narrative. Because this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was something bigger, something deeper. And once people started realizing what actually happened behind the scenes, the backlash wasn't just coming. It was already building. And it was about to hit harder than anyone expected. The second Raven Johnson said it, everything flipped. But the internet didn't stay quiet. It erupted. Because now the same people who spent weeks building the Clark versus Raven narrative had a problem they couldn't explain. Their entire storyline just got exposed by the one person they used to prove it. And instead of backing off, they pushed harder. Clips started circulating instantly. Raven switched up. "This is PR. She doesn't really mean it." You could feel the desperation, because once a narrative starts collapsing, people don't let go easily. They try to rebuild it, even if the foundation is already gone. But here's where things got worse for them. Because Raven didn't just say one sentence and move on. She doubled down. In interviews and locker room clips, in behind-the-scenes footage, she kept praising Caitlin Clark, calling her a mentor, saying she helps her with everything, describing her as funny, supportive, someone who actually cares. That doesn't sound like tension. That sounds like trust. And suddenly, the focus shifted. Because now people weren't just asking, were we wrong? They were asking something more uncomfortable. Why did we believe it so easily? That's when the second twist hit, harder than the first. Because the more footage came out, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a peaceful coexistence. This was chemistry. Real on-court chemistry. Clark pushing pace. Raven applying pressure. Clark reading defenses. Raven creating chaos. And when those two things combine, it changes everything. Because now, instead of canceling each other out, they were amplifying each other. That's dangerous. That's not just a storyline. That's a problem for the rest of the league. And inside the Fever organization, you could see it. Coaches weren't forcing it. They were building around it. 3-guard lineups. Defensive rotations centered around Raven. Offensive flow running through Clark. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional. Which means something else becomes true. Indiana didn't ignore the history. They understood it. And they still made the move. That's not a gamble. That's confidence. And now, it was paying off in real time. Meanwhile, the locker room chaos narrative kept getting weaker. Because the more players spoke, the more the truth leaked out. Aaliyah Boston, fully locked in with Clark again. Kelsey Mitchell, thriving in spacing. The offense flowing. The energy connected. This didn't look like a fractured team. It looked like a team figuring it out faster than expected. And that's when the conversation turned ugly. Because once people couldn't attack the chemistry, they started attacking the narrative itself. Media lied. Stories were fabricated. People pushed this on purpose. Now it wasn't just about two players. It became about trust. About who controls the story. About how quickly perception can override reality. And that's where things got dangerous. Because once fans feel like they've been misled, they don't just move on. They react. And the reaction started building across every platform. Posts calling out analysts. Videos exposing old takes. Clips being replayed. But this time, with a completely different meaning. The same wave-off moment, now being reinterpreted as strategy, not disrespect. The same "she broke me" quote, now seen as growth, not weakness. Everything flipped. And the people who built their content on that original narrative were suddenly on the wrong side of it. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. This didn't just clear Caitlin Clark's name. It elevated Raven Johnson. Because in one move, she went from being the player who got disrespected to the player who controlled the narrative, who faced it, who flipped it, who owned it. That's power. And now the league was watching closely. Because this wasn't just about Indiana anymore. This was about something bigger. something that affects every player stepping into the spotlight. Because if narratives can be built this fast and destroyed this publicly, then nobody is safe from becoming the next storyline. And that realization, that's when things started getting personal. Because the fallout wasn't just online anymore. It was reaching inside the league itself. And what happened next started hitting way closer to home. The second the narrative collapsed, the fallout didn't just stay online. It exploded everywhere. Because this wasn't a quiet correction. This was public embarrassment. The same accounts, the same analysts, the same voices who spent weeks pushing the Clark versus Raven storyline were suddenly getting flooded. Comments, replies, quote tweets, receipts, old clips being dragged back into the spotlight, but now with a completely different tone. Remember when you said they hated each other? Where's the locker room drama now? You were wrong. And it wasn't just fans. It was other creators, other analysts, even former players subtly stepping in, choosing their words carefully, but making one thing clear. The narrative didn't match reality. And once that door opened, everything started pouring out. Because people weren't just correcting the story. They were questioning why it existed in the first place. Why was Caitlin Clark always at the center of these narratives? Why did every situation around her turn into drama before facts? Why did one college moment get stretched into a full-blown professional conflict? Those questions hit harder than any highlight ever could. Because now it wasn't just about basketball. It was about perception. And perception was shifting fast. Meanwhile, inside Indiana's locker room, the energy was completely different from what the outside world expected. No tension, no division, just momentum. Players laughing, communicating, competing. Aaliyah Boston back on the floor, reconnecting instantly with Clark. Kelsey Mitchell finding rhythm. Raven Johnson embracing her role without hesitation. This didn't look like a team dealing with drama. This looked like a team building something. And that contrast, that's what made the outside noise feel even louder. Because every time the Fever stepped on the court and looked connected, it exposed how wrong the narrative had been. And for Caitlin Clark, this moment hit differently. Because for months, every move she made was under a microscope. Every gesture analyzed. Every reaction questioned. And now, without saying much at all, the truth was coming out through someone else. Through Raven. Through the one person people claimed she had broken. That's the part nobody expected. Clark didn't have to defend herself. She didn't have to respond. She didn't have to argue. The narrative corrected itself. And that kind of silence, that kind of validation, it hits harder than any statement ever could. But it also comes with pressure. Because now the expectations change. Now it's not about can they coexist. It's about how far can they go. And inside the league, people were paying attention. Because when a team goes from question mark to dangerous this quickly, it forces everyone else to adjust. Scouts start watching differently. Defenses start planning differently. Opponents start taking it seriously. And just like that, what started as a narrative about conflict turned into a warning. Because if this chemistry is real, if Raven continues to disrupt, if Clark continues to control the game at this level, then Indiana isn't just a storyline anymore. They're a problem. And that's when the emotional weight shifts again. Because proving people wrong feels good. But backing it up, that's where everything gets harder. And with she changes conversations. And that creates tension. Not always on the court, but around it. Because when one player starts pulling attention, ratings, storylines, and expectations in a completely different direction, everything else has to adjust. And not everyone is comfortable with that. That's the part people don't say out loud. But you can feel it. In the coverage, in the debates, in how quickly narratives form around her. Because every moment involving Clark gets amplified. Every reaction gets analyzed. Every interaction becomes a headline waiting to happen. And Raven Johnson just stepped directly into that storm. And flipped it. Not by attacking it. Not by feeding into it. But by refusing to play along. Think about it. She had every reason to lean into that old narrative. She could have stayed neutral. She could have avoided the question. She could have let the tension live, because it would have kept the spotlight on her. Instead, she did the opposite. She shut it down. Publicly. Clearly. And in doing that, she didn't just defend Clark. She aligned with her. And that's where the real twist hits. Because now this isn't a rivalry story anymore. It's a partnership story. And that's far more dangerous. Because rivalries create headlines. But partnerships win games. And if what we just saw against Nigeria is even close to real, then the rest of the league has a problem they didn't prepare for. A backcourt that blends control and chaos, vision and pressure, patience and aggression. That's not easy to defend. That's not easy to game plan. And it's definitely not something you can ignore. But here's the catch. Because every breakout story comes with a test. Preseason doesn't prove anything. It hints. It teases. It builds expectations. But the real truth? That comes when the games actually matter. When defenses tighten. When scouting reports adjust. When the pressure isn't hypothetical anymore. It's real. Opening night. Full arena. Full attention. No excuses. That's where everything changes. That's where narratives don't just shift. They either survive or collapse completely. And right now, Indiana is walking into that moment with something nobody expected just weeks ago. Momentum, chemistry, and a narrative that already flipped once. But the real question isn't what just happened. It's what happens next. Because if this connection between Raven Johnson and Caitlin Clark is real, if this isn't just a preseason illusion, then the league isn't just watching a storyline unfold. They're watching a shift. And the scariest part? It might just be getting started. So now the question isn't what people thought anymore. It's what you see right in front of you. Was this just a preseason moment that got overhyped? Or did Raven Johnson just expose one of the biggest false narratives of season before it even started? Because let's be real, a few weeks ago, people were calling this locker room a disaster. Now, it looks like one of the most dangerous backcourts in the league. And that shift didn't happen quietly. It happened in front of everyone. So I want to hear your honest take. Was the Clark versus Raven story completely fake from the start? Or did something change behind the scenes that flipped everything? And more importantly, do you think this connection actually holds when the regular season pressure hits? Because opening night is coming fast. And that's where all of this gets tested for real. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't play it safe. Say exactly what you think. And if you want real breakdowns that don't follow the fake narratives, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. Because this story, it's not over. Not even close.